Okay, hi everybody. Welcome. Hi, how you doing, Taylor? We've got a couple of guests with us today, and if you would like to introduce yourselves, in case you haven't gotten into any of our other videos, I am Leif Ulrich. I'm the counselor at RVCS Matanzas, and
I'm Taylor. I'm the counselor at RVCS Sequoia. Ms. Newton, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, I'm Heidi Newton, and I teach history 7th and 8th grade at RVCS Sequoia.
And I'm Ethan Cosgrove, but your student would know me as Mr. Cosgrove, and I teach 7th grade math and 7th grade history at RVCS Sequoia as well.
Great, great. So the reason we've asked you two here today is because we've done many of these videos from the counselor's point of view and talking about things that can help parents out, subjects that, around their students, and how we can better support them in schools. But one thing we haven't touched on yet is, it's a collaboration, right? It's the student, it's the parent, but more importantly, it's the teachers. And how distance learning is going for you, how you have things set up, what differences there are for you. And so I think we'd like to start with just hearing about like a typical day for one of you, if one of you wants to start. What does your day look like? Like you don't walk in, you log in, right? At whatever time in the morning. And what's the first thing you hit the ground doing? How does it look? Who would like to go?
Well, I'll start. Actually, both Mr. Cosgrove and I come into school for our classes. So we are in our classrooms, and we are starting off our day with office hours. And one thing I am happy about that I do have students that are coming in to office hours. So that's really nice. I like that part. Not only does it give me a chance to connect with them personally and, talk to them a little bit, I know what questions they have, and I'm able to help them. It makes me feel more like a real teacher, because right now this is really hard. It's not what I was trained to do. I was trained to really interact with students and to be able to build personal connections with them and to see what they're doing, to put them in situations where they're going to be learning with their peers, and now it's totally different. So anyways, after office hours, then I will have classes, or sometimes I have a planning period first. But I will, for each of my classes, I have my classes split in half, so that students aren't having to be on a Zoom meeting for 2 hours straight. And so I have asynchronous for 1 hour and synchronous for 1 hour, half and half. And so I switch. So I actually am talking a whole lot. I talk for a straight 2 hours, even though they only have to listen for 1 hour. But that has worked better for me, and I feel like it's better for the students. They kind of can stay better focused during that 1 hour that they are with me.
Okay. So that's, so you've got 3 blocks a day. And during your planning period, what are you doing during that planning period?
Planning.
When you say planning,
so,
I don't think parents understand what that actually involves.
Yeah, so I am looking through, a lot of the things that I have used in the past don't work to teach in a virtual learning environment. And so I am researching, trying to find things that I can use that will engage students, that are short enough that are going to fit into that 1 hour time frame. So I spend a lot of time doing that. I spend time grading. I spend time going through, looking at my different students and their needs, trying to figure out how to group them, how to help them to be successful.
Mm-hmm. What about emails? How many emails a day do you get?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's the other thing. Emails. I answer emails a lot.
Yeah.
I need a secretary to answer my emails for me. That's what I would really like.
Other teacher need a person. No, I know. And I know we get a lot as counselors. I can't imagine how many you guys get every single day. And it's from students, it's from parents, and it's from the district as well, or even other teachers and things. So
Mhm.
I would say for myself, it takes up a good part of my day, and I can't imagine for you all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mr. Cosgrove, how about you?
So my day starts with on my way to work. I drop off my 9-month-old son at daycare, and then hopefully I get to work by about 7:45, 8. And it starts with checking those emails you were just talking about, seeing if any are ones I need to like immediately respond to or anything along those lines. I always have first period classes, so I have office hours for 30 minutes. I would like to say I had as many people coming as Mrs. Newton seems to have, but I don't, unfortunately. I always hope that I'm going to have more. I think I teach 7th grade math. So for a lot of kids, voluntarily going to essentially extra math is not something that a lot of them are going to do. I also have 7th graders, so I think there's definitely 8th graders are a little more comfortable. A lot of them knew Mrs. Newton last year when they could actually see her as well, which is helpful. And then I go into my class. Much like Mrs. Newton, I split it into half, although I start with like a 15-minute period where everyone's together. Mostly because kids will be 5 to 10 minutes late, and so I want to make sure everyone knows what they're doing in those asynchronous time periods.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, as Ms. Newton said, a lot of me talking for 2 hours, and then normally students stick around for a little bit, like a handful of students will stick around because they have questions or they just want to talk to me and build some relationships. And then I go right back into it for another 2 hours. And so essentially I'm staring at Zoom from 8:15 until 1, at which point I answer emails. And then I try to quickly, so I'm constantly getting late work in my emails where people are just saying, hey, I did this assignment, could you go check this? And so I get to click through PowerSchool and make sure I do them, because if I get too far behind on those, they start to get on like the last page of my emails, and I'm always worried I'm gonna forget about something. And then I attempt to grade and I plan until about 2:30, and then I go home, and then I start to plan and grade again around like 7:30 when my child goes back down to sleep. So a lot of staring at screens, which I can only imagine what it'd be like as a 12 to 14-year-old, because by halfway through the second Zoom or so, I'm just fried. And I'm even like a lot more engaged, right? Like I'm the one talking a lot of times, or I have a bunch of things going on. So I can only imagine some of these students where it's more passive and they're just kind of staring at a screen, what that must be like.
Yeah, a question I had about that was, I mean, because I know when I've gone into classrooms to do like classroom guidance and things, sometimes it's really difficult. You go in there and you only have like half the cameras up. So you don't know how many students are actually receiving the message you're trying to give.
Right.
And it's difficult sometimes to keep yourself engaged when you're not getting anything back, as opposed to in a classroom, if you can feel if something's going flat, right? It's kind of like being on a stage. You can kind of feel if things aren't hitting, and you can change things up in that moment, but it's more difficult in this setting as a teacher to go in and be able to do that and to read the room so much, right?
Right.
That's true. And another thing that's difficult is when students are having connectivity problems, and like I'll be just getting into something I'm sharing, talking about, explaining, and then somebody pipes up and said, oh, could you repeat that? My computer lagged, I didn't catch anything that you said. And I was just like, oh, okay. So I start again, and then the next person, so I feel like I'm either spinning wheels, or like Mr. Cosgrove said, that after you've been staring at the screen for so long and delivering the same message a couple of times, I forget where I'm at. Like, wait, did I say that already? I mean, I've had to stop so many times now, I'm not sure where I'm even at. So that's something that's really, really hard.
Yeah, it can be frustrating. Technology is definitely throwing a wrench into everything, right?
Well, yeah.
We're having to work with imperfect technology.
Right.
Taylor, did you have any questions, or?
Oh yeah, I've got a bunch. But I think talking about connection, but like a different type of connection, how has that been for you guys? Because I know that I would say that most people get into teaching or counseling because they want to connect with people. And I know at RVCS, connecting with kids has been like, since I've seen it, has been one of the really important aspects of working with the children, is like being able to connect with them. So how has that been for you guys this year?
It's just a lot more difficult. Whereas in a normal school year, by like the first week, I know every student on campus and their names and what they look like, and maybe even like who they hang out with, right? Because the first week of school, I'll walk around during lunch, just kind of see what are the friends groups, like who is kind of on their own, so I can try to push them towards other people who are kind of on their own. Because RVCS, that's one of the things that makes it special, is that like there aren't any kids just like hanging out alone in a hallway. Like everyone has friends. And so that's really hard, just not being able to do that. It's also a lot more, like it's hard to have a connection with someone you rarely see, and who when you see it's just like a name on Black background. And so like students, I feel like I'm failing in some ways, students who have a poor internet connection, because I just don't have a strong relationship with them as much as I would love to. And so I think that's really hard. That being said, I still feel like I have strong relationships with many students, especially those students who, and I think we'll come back to this, who advocate for themselves. Like the more a student speaks up, the more interactions I have with them, the more you build that relationship. Because ultimately that's what a relationship is. It's iteration and interactions.
Totally. And I will say that the majority of seventh graders that I talk to know you too. Oh yeah, Miss Newton. Oh yeah, Mr. Cosgrove. What about for you, Miss Newton?
It's been really hard for me. I really, I love just hanging out with the students and talking to them, and, having them spill the tea, and I get to find out everything, and that's a lot of fun. But this has just been really hard. And so for me, Mr. Cosgrove only has seventh graders this year, which is hard. My eighth graders, of course, most of them I have known, I've had them in class before. And so I feel like I have a better relationship with them because I had one previously, but I've been able to carry on, right? I can remember stuff from last year and I can bring it up, we can talk. And so I feel like I really have this connection with them. And it's almost like, oh, this is so nice. I feel comfortable with them. With my seventh graders, I'm struggling. I want to know them better. And the ones that do come to office hours and I can chat with them, or, some of them I've set up individual meetings with aside from my office hours, and that works. But, when they don't have that camera on and they're just a name, it's really difficult. I try to always be there for pickup days so that I can try to meet some of them in person, but I go up to a car and I'm like, okay, and who do we have here? And it's a student I have, and I'm just like, I feel really bad. I know exactly, where they usually are on my screen, that kind of thing, and what their name looks like, but I don't know who they are, and that's hard. Although I do like, in some of their writing, in my classes, they're doing current events, and at the end of a current event, they have to put a little reflection piece why they chose the article that they did. So they have their choice of News ELA articles. I have a couple of them in a text set for them, like 5 or 6 that they can choose from. But it's interesting because as I read that reflection piece, I'm learning about them, what they like or what interests them. And so that's been nice, but it definitely doesn't take the place of being in person. Yeah. It's hard. And then plus, because I have my class set up the way I do with just 1 hour of time, I feel like I don't have a lot of time to spend on, chit chat. Whereas in a normal classroom situation, I'd be walking around and I could have a really quick one-on-one conversation. And now I can't, if I have them in breakout rooms, and sometimes I can do that, right, when I go to the different rooms, but right now, if I try to say something, everybody hears it. And so that sometimes makes middle schoolers feel awkward and uncomfortable to have their teacher say something to them that,
in front of everybody.
You're in front of everybody. Yeah.
And I think, and that just resonates so much with me because I have them in groups of 3 or 4 for math. And I think for some of the kids, that's part of why they don't ask for help. Because it's really hard to ask for help in front of your peers because there's always this like assumption that everyone else is getting it. And I think the students really need to hear the fact that, and I try to say as much as possible, like that if you don't understand something, odds are quite a few other students don't understand it as well. So sometimes I'll get emails from a student saying like, hey, Mr. Cosgrove, like this link doesn't work. And I think to myself, how many of my students have gone on this page and tried to use this link and had it not work and then just didn't do it because they're like, oh, the link didn't work until this one kid spoke up or sent me an email or whatever. There was a day where it was all asynchronous and a number of the links were broken. I know they're broken because a handful of students were emailing me. And I was thinking to myself, what are the other 35 students doing? Because I know they can't be doing the work. And none of them are reaching out to me. And it's kind of crazy to realize what a huge percentage of the students, when they're stuck, are not speaking up. And until that changes, it's going to be really hard to have effective learning moving forward.
Yeah, well, I think you've both hit on something really important. And I agree, the 8th graders, it's always so nice to go in and see the 8th graders because like you said, we know them in person. So we've already developed those relationships with them and that, and we're still in the process of moving them along to high school and we're feeling comfortable with that. Our 7th graders, we always kind of want to bring them in and say, okay, you're part of our community. And I think that's one piece that we've struggled with for them this year is helping them feel like they're part of our community and getting to know them on that one-on-one, just like you said, walking through the quad and, having a side conversation or just saying hello or whatever and getting to know their little quirks and everything. Not being able to do that this year. So I know the 7th graders, and it's hard, right? Think about 7th graders. They're still really young right now. They're 11, 12 years old. And they've gone from being in a classroom with all the same kids and the same teacher and the same everything. And now they've got to figure out how to do 6 classes and do it all online and all these different teachers. And the expectations are that much higher. And it is super intimidating for them. So hopefully going into this next trimester, we can help them. And maybe parents can help too. Maybe that's something we can talk about a little bit is how parents might be able to help with this. Because I'm feeling from you guys, you really want to create that connection for them and we all want it, but it has to be kind of a collaboration between the student and the teacher and the parent at this point, because, parents are that other side of the screen with the student.
Well, yeah, and I think I think they're all of that is connected. The connection piece, asking students not feeling comfortable asking questions in class has come up across the board. I mean, I hear that almost every time I talk to someone, parents and kids. And I think it's all connected. It's all the connection, being a 7th grader, not being used to technology, all of those things. But so Heidi, you mentioned having a camera on totally helps with connection, even if it's a little uncomfortable for kids. And it sounds like one-on-one meetings. If kids are able to like somehow connect with you one-on-one is super important. Are there other things that kids or parents could do that kind of facilitate that connection?
I don't know. I would be happy even if kids just came into office hours just to say hi. They maybe if they didn't even have a question, that's fine. Yeah. I do have one 7th grade student whom I just adore, and he loves to like stay afterwards and show me things. And I know that he does with other teachers too, just likes to share who he is. And I love it because I feel like I really know him. And so it doesn't even necessarily have to be with a specific question or concern that they might be having in class. It would be fun for the kids to maybe set a goal and say, okay, you know, once a week, I'm going to pop into one of my teacher's office hours and just chat with them for a minute. You know, so they just are doing that kind of thing because it's something that they would have done if they were on campus, right? They would be coming into your classroom, and maybe it would even be a student I don't even have, but I'd get to know them because they're with their friend. And then, you know, they start talking to me and I know them that way. And so just making that effort, because I can't, you know, I'm in my office hours. I can't, you know, connect to them. They have to make that step, which is hard too, right? I feel like, you know, I'm kind of in this weird position where I need to wait for them to come to me a lot of the time.
But that's, I mean, that's a great example. And I've done that with a few kids where I have, like, when we meet, I'll have them email me later in the week, and it'll just be some silly question, like their favorite, like what the best song they listened to was or something. But the idea is for them to get used to emailing an adult and practice that. But I think what you're talking about, being able to like practice like emailing or jumping onto office hours or kind of putting themselves out there, is a perfect like first step in the self-advocacy skills. Like, and that's really, I think that's one of the most difficult things is like, I feel like 7th graders now with all the distance learning are kind of forced to have these self-advocacy, I can never say it, advocacy. That was like, when I was a little kid, that was always like throwing rocks in the river. That was my practice. But it's, you know, it's tough because these 7th graders don't have those skills. When they were in 6th grade, they didn't have to, you know, worry about talking to multiple teachers. Their teacher was right there. So I think that's a big topic, is helping 7th graders and 8th graders, but helping everyone build those advocacy skills. Mm-hmm. So what have you guys seen anything that helps kids? You know, have you done anything in your classrooms to help kids build those skills? Are there things that kids and parents could do from your end that would really help facilitate building those skills in their little ones?
I think a lot of it has to do with misconceptions that students have. And I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but it's like students, like and normally in class, I constantly talk about this. And it's not like a formal lesson, it's just like talking about it here, talking about it there, but the students get enough times. The idea that, like in math especially, students for some reason think that if you ask questions, that means that you're dumb. And it's crazy because a lot of times it's the opposite. It's like the kids who are asking the most questions are the ones who are doing the best in my class. I remember a couple of years ago, the 2 students who asked the most questions had the 2 highest grades in my class, right? And so it's the complete opposite of what students imagine. Or they imagine that if they don't get something, that they're the only one that doesn't get it. In a class of 40 students, if you don't understand something, at least 10 other students, if not more, also do not understand something. So it takes like some bravery to like say like, hey, I don't understand this. But those 10 to 20 students who also didn't understand it will like you more for it, right? Because you just stood up and made it so they didn't need to. And it's not even like I need you personally to advocate for yourself every single time. If there's a culture of people speaking up and asking questions, a lot of times someone else will ask that question for you. But if everyone is just silent together, then I have no idea, right? Like sometimes I'll give instructions and I know because of how long the instructions were or how complex they were, I know that the students don't get it. I don't know what part they don't get, but I know they don't get it. And I'm just waiting and hoping that someone will like say like, this specifically is unclear. But until someone says that, I just move on, right? Because what am I just gonna go through the exact same instructions again without actually clarifying anything? So really being specific about, I think the other big misconception is students think that if they don't understand one part of something, that they don't understand anything. And especially in math, a lot of times it's like there are 10 steps to a problem and you don't understand one step. And if you just ask me about that one step, you can be like, oh, I totally get it. And it goes from, I don't understand it at all to this is easy, just like that. And all they had to do is speak up, right?
I'm thinking this is actually where parents might be able to help, because I mean, obviously on the other side of the screen in their homes, they're the ones that are supporting their their children in their studies.
Right.
So if they're looking at an assignment or a grade or something and going, well, what's going on with that? You know, I think the first question should be, have you contacted your teacher? Right? I know that's a question I often talk to students about when we're talking about their grades, is if they're struggling in a class, it's like, well, have you spoken to your teacher about this? Oh no, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, let's talk about what you need to ask them and how you can do it. Do you want to email them? Do you want to go to their office hours? How, you know, do you want to wait after class? How do you want to do this? So we practice. I help students with practicing how to approach the teachers. And it's like this even when we're in person. It's the same kind of thing. Usually once they do it 1 or 2 times, it's like, oh, okay, I've got a new skill here. I can do this. But those first couple times can be really hard. So I think for parents, it is important that first thing shouldn't be, well, I'll contact your teacher or I'll help you figure this out. It should be, have you contacted your teacher? And how can you do this? What's the best way to do that? And then, you know, help your student figure it out. And then maybe a couple of days later, check back and say, did you hear back from your teacher? Have you gotten that figured out? So maybe just support it without doing it for them, I think would be really useful.
Yeah, or even, you know, I find that with my students a lot, you know, I'll get emails that say, I don't understand this. And, you know, my first thing always is, have you read Power School? Have you gone to Power School and looked? And because really one of the things that takes me so long in my planning is how I am super careful and how I'm writing instructions. I try to be very specific. I try to put everything there so that, let's say somebody, you know, their computer isn't working or whatever, they can read and they should be able to know what's going on. You know, they should be able to say, oh, okay, I need to go here, I need to go there, this is where I'm going to find that. And so, you know, a lot of times I'll have students, they'll come on and I'll say, okay, well, let's look at Power School and, you know, read through this here. And they'll be like, oh, okay. Oh, it was there all along. And then, or I'll get emails from parents that will say, you know, my kid says blah, 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 blah. And then I meet with the parent and they're like, oh, okay. Yeah. It's there.
It's like The Amazing Race, right? Read the clue. Right? Read the clue. Do what they ask you to do, right?
I think sometimes maybe students just feel super overwhelmed. You know, they see a bunch of type on a page and they're like, ugh, that looks like a lot. But unfortunately, you know, it's part of growing up, for one, right? Being able to figure out things. But part of it is the culture in which we are right now. You have to use that skill of reading and trying to glean what you can from it, and then you know, go to the teacher or to the parent or whoever and say, okay, you know, I'm thinking this is what it says. I want to clarify and make sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think you touched on it too. It's especially at RVCS. Middle school is, the way it's viewed at RVCS is preparation for high school, which is very different than an extension of elementary school. And I think that just that subtle shift in the way that you look at school is huge. And I see a lot of 7th graders especially struggling because they're still thinking that this is going to be like that extension of elementary school, where if they didn't understand something, the teacher's going to come up to them and, you know, hey, do you get this? And it's a shift to go from having a teacher come up and ask you, do you understand, to having to ask, can you help me with this? And I'm totally guilty of like just calling Miss Lovelace, hey, Miss Lovelace, what's this? When I probably could find it on my own. And so I understand where some of the kids come from, where it is easier just to like, you know, hey, Mr. Cosgrove, I don't get this, instead of going online and looking at like, oh yeah, this is here, this is here, this is here. But I would imagine the more often that you walk them through things like that is super helpful. And not just so they understand it, but also so they get in the rhythm of like, okay, this is on me. I got to do this first. And I would imagine that the parents are echoing the same thing. You know, hey, did you check Power School? Did you check this? Okay. Oh, then did you email your teacher? They're getting that sort of message across the board. Like, hey, this is on you, not on everyone else.
And I think that's something that parents could really help with. I think in a normal school year, there are certain barriers to students successfully doing things or students accessing their work. And I think normally teachers help you remove or overcome some of those barriers, like organization, just simple things like writing stuff in a planner. Like I know Mrs. Newton and Mr. Cornfine, we have a number of teachers who are great at, like they stamp each person's individual planner to make sure that they wrote down their homework.
Mhm.
Well, spoiler, we're not stamping any planners this year, right? We don't have that ability. So like stuff like that, where a parent is helping a student to, you can hear my baby crying in the background, helping a student to stay organized or checking that planner every day, because there should be stuff written, especially this year, because there's so much asynchronous work that they're gonna have something they're supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
I think there are still students who think that on Wednesdays they don't have any work to do, whereas they're supposed to be spending at least 30 minutes in each class on Wednesdays doing work. And I think a lot of them are just like, oh, Wednesdays, we don't have school on Wednesdays. This is great. We go to advocacy.
Mhm.
The other big thing, like reducing those barriers to students getting work done, is making sure kids have a designated place to work. And that is always their place to work. And they work there, and that is what they do there. It is not their bed. It is not the kitchen table. And I understand this is difficult for some families. Like some people only have so much space, right?
Mhm.
But having a place where their Chromebook is always sitting and their different work is always there. It's not like, oh, I have to track this stuff down. It's, oh, it's all right here. And the planner is right here too. And then the third thing would be, I know a lot of parents are working at the same time and a lot of them are working from home. But if you know your student's supposed to be in a Zoom meeting, if you just like pop your head into their room, I'm not saying constantly, but maybe once every hour or two, and just see what they're doing. Because especially when they have their cameras off, we don't know, right? But if you just establish a tradition of occasionally popping your head in and your child knows that that may happen at any time, especially if you make it like infrequent, if it's not at the same time every time, then suddenly they're like put on notice. Like, oh, if I'm staring at my phone when my parent comes in, like they're gonna know, or there's gonna be some sort of consequence to this, right? Because that half of teaching that we used to be able to do just isn't available to us. And I understand that this is hard, but if you're a parent and you're wondering how you can help, those three things would be a great place to start.
Right. You guys have the academics, but parents need to help a little bit more with the being in class piece of it, because it is out of your control this year. Yeah.
And I think it's important too to keep, you know, I think I come back to this a lot, that I do believe that people are doing the best they can with what they've been given. And I know for a lot of the families that I work with, I have no idea outside of like maybe the kiddo or the parents, kind of what they tell me, what's going on. And, you know, I think that it's important for parents and everyone to keep in mind that like we're all like the tips that we come up with and like things that help are things that we notice, and it's like, oh, hey, this is working, and we're sharing it with parents. You know, because I think on the one hand, I don't want parents to feel like, you know, hey, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. Because I've had those meetings where, you know, I'm telling them things and I can see it in, you know, even through the computer, that they're feeling like, okay, I can't do another thing.
Right.
But also I think as we, and especially like for me, learning all of these Zoom meetings and technology and stuff, as I learn stuff, it's, you know, it's really important to be able to share it with parents. And, you know, just like the tip of popping your head in with the camera, you know, a lot of parents I've talked to, they have no idea that their kids' cameras are off. And, you know, just popping your head in there intermittently, it's a very Skinner type thing that you got there. You guys remember, I like it. Some behaviorism. But I think it is really helpful for parents just to, you know, pop in there. Hey, what's going on? Oh, your camera's off. Your video games are on. Interesting. But then on the other hand too, to be able to say, oh, hey, you actually are on you're on your Zoom meeting. That's awesome. Let's, you know, why don't you get it done and we could do something fun? And that, I think, Lee, that's come up a lot with some of our parents, is like tapping into that motivation for kids. Like what's going to motivate you to actually get the work done. And that's, yeah, motivating 7th graders to do work online is is a whole
Be
new
a challenge.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah, you have to find the carrot that works for the kid, and every kid is different, right?
I think it's important for parents to remember too that seventh grade is hard, period. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of these first time seventh grade parents are seeing this and thinking, oh, this is all the fault of distance learning, when in fact it's not. We would have a lot of these same problems if we were in the classroom, right? Because it's just where they are right now. They're having to learn to take responsibility for themselves. And for some, that's really hard. They're not ready to grow up and have to do that yet. And so that's really, you know, what middle school is all about, right? Leaf, you talked, or maybe it was Taylor talked earlier about how at RVCS, that's what we do. You know, we have this mindset that we're preparing them for high school so that they will be successful there. And you know, when I meet with parents in a normal year, you know, I just try to tell them it's okay. You know, they're going to make mistakes, and you know, it's a well-kept secret, but middle school grades don't count for anything. You know, it's not going to make or break your child's future. And so this is the place to learn, though, right? This is the time to make those mistakes and, you know, to teach them how to put things in a planner, how to schedule your time, so that, you know, you don't get burnt out, that you have some fun in there too. You know, I always, you know, tell kids, okay, set a timer for 20 minutes, work really hard. Don't be on your phone. Don't be doing anything else. Do your work for 20 minutes and then go take a 5 or 10 minute break, and, you know, then come back, and, you know, so that you know, if you want to play a video game, then, you know, you have 10 minutes, play a game really fast, and then come back to your work. But it's really all about learning that. And I think that that's important for parents to keep in mind, that we're all struggling this year, but some of those struggles we would have anyways.
Right. I always say that 7th grade is practice for 8th grade, and 8th grade is practice for high school.
Yeah.
And I always tell my 7th graders, believe it or not, 8th grade is going to be a lot easier.
Yeah.
Because they're going to know how to do school. They're trying to learn how to do school this year, those poor 7th graders, on top of everything else, right? So yeah, this is a practice year, and it's okay. But we also need to have that communication. And I do think if one thing that comes out of this, when we get to the other side of it and return to school, if those 7th graders can develop those self-advocacy skills, because that will only help them throughout the entire thing.
Right. And I think there are certain advantages. I think our students will come out of this year with some higher level skills compared to what we would compare them to, like the willingness to go to power school and the ability to advocate for yourself because they don't have us in class, like looking over their shoulder. I would imagine they're going to come out of this in some ways with some advantages, although obviously they're
right, a little bit ahead of the game.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree.
And speaking to Mrs. Newton's taking breaks, 2 hours of math is brutal for anyone, even people who are like math degrees. Like spending 2 hours straight doing math is incredibly difficult. My expectation when you are asynchronous is that you are just kind of taking breaks when needed. And really the key is I don't necessarily care if you spend that 45 minutes to an hour of asynchronous math time doing it then or doing it at 5 o'clock in the afternoon or 8 o'clock or whatever. Really the big thing in my math class is learning the material and then just getting the work done. If I had to choose between a student who never comes to the Zoom but always turns in their work versus someone who always comes into the Zoom but never turns in anything, I'll take the person doing their work but not showing up to the Zoom. And my class is actually structured in a way where you should be able to complete the work even if you never see me. Is it going to be as engaging or fun? Definitely not. But if you're a sort of student who enjoys just kind of doing the math and can watch those videos to get help, I'm here to teach you math first. And so if that's what you're doing, then I am happy.
Except for that California attendance thing.
They do have to show up to class because they do need to show up to class so we know they're in school. Yeah. The whole
But if well,
we're talking to the counselors here, we need attendance. But I understand your point. The point being that, you know, show up to that Zoom, But what you do in that hour when you're not in the Zoom, if you have an hour that you're supposed to be doing other work, whether you do it in the other half of that block or you do it later on that day.
Right.
As long as it's getting done, you're good with it.
Right.
Yeah, because, and that's a self-discipline piece as well, right? It's teaching, okay, maybe, you know, maybe after an hour in a Zoom, they have to get up and take a run around the backyard or go hit the tennis ball against the garage door, whatever it is they need to do. Go do that for 20 minutes or 30 minutes even. And then if you're that way, you might be better prepared to come back to and get your work done, right? I know some days when you say you're on Zoom from, you know, 8:45 in the morning to 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
I mean, I have days like that as well, where I hit the ground running at 8 o'clock and I look up at like 2, 3 o'clock and it's like, oh, I can't see anymore, right? These glasses only do so much. So it can be fatiguing. So they should build in those times when they can walk away and, like you said, play a video game, take a short walk, get a snack, get a glass of water, do what they need to do to give their brain a break, and then be able to come back refreshed.
Go outside.
That's what I tell my kids.
Go outside. Like the number of these students, and we had this a lot, I know for sure last year, like there are students who sit in their room all day and never go outside. Like when they're in their Zoom, the windows are even closed, like the blinds are closed. I'm just like, man, like humans are not designed to sit in a little room without a window all day.
No.
And still be like happy at the end of the day. Like you're just gonna feel drained and kind of defeated. And then those same kids retreat into video games because it gives them some sort of reprieve, but it just kind of makes it even worse, right? It's like this vicious cycle. So forcing your child to go outside, I think would be my biggest tip.
Yeah. Well, I know I mean, Heidi, you've seen me over at the office a few times, but like I've got about, you know, depending on the Zoom meetings, if they're super intense, I mean, it's like a couple hours before I'm like, I need a real life break. And I go over and bug Miss Lovelace or Miss Bates. I know the first time she's like, Taylor, office hours are for computers, not real life. But it, you know, and I think and I say that because I viewed myself as more of an introvert before COVID, and I didn't realize how much real interaction I need with people. And I think like for these middle schoolers, especially these 7th graders, they need so much interaction and they need so much time just being outside. And if we look at the last, you know, 2 months that we've had, it's been a rough time outdoors for Sonoma County. And I think while we have a little bit of a window to get outside before it's rainy and gnarly, you know, it's important to get outside while you can. And even if it's like taking the dog for a walk or just sitting outside. I know a lot of people have been doing their Zoom meetings from outdoors. And so if kids are able to, you know, take the Chromebook and sit outside in the garden or whatever, in the front porch, you know, there's a whole lot of research about how just being outside is good for you. And so,
yeah, it was funny because I actually did take a run earlier. And I was up at the park and I was doing a lap at the park, and there were a couple of, obviously they were probably middle schoolers or early high schoolers, and you could see they'd ridden their bike to the park and they'd brought chairs and they were sitting at the park in the sun, and they had like their devices in front of them, but they were at the park doing this because they were getting themselves outside. And I'm like, you know, good on you guys for being able to go out and do that. And they made the effort to get away from home and, you know, get in a different surrounding. So I thought that was really cool.
I know we have to run to a staff meeting in a few minutes, but I wanted to hit on I wanted to hear from you guys, because in the beginning we talked about the massive amount of emails. And so it just made me curious because I talk to people about boundaries all the time. And so I'm just curious, like, one, how COVID distance learning has been for you guys individually, just as people, like school aside, but then also, do you guys have boundaries with emails, because I know teachers do so much work at home on the weekend. Do you guys have personal boundaries with how you structure your time or your day or anything like that?
I am good with boundaries.
Oh, nice.
I'm the person, in fact, in the summertime, I don't really do stuff. And I remember someone this summer was trying to get a hold of me, and they contacted Mrs. Conrad, and she said, "Oh, you will need to send her a text because she does not look at her email in the summer." And I don't. And I'm that way too. You know, when I leave, when school's out on Friday, even if I'm doing other work over the weekend, like planning or grading or whatever, I'm not on email. That is just, you know, I have those boundaries. I'm a professional working, right? And I work Monday through Friday. And so I do try to, you know, stick to that. It is more difficult when you're at home. You know, I kind of feel it's one of the reasons I like to go to school, because it helps me to keep those boundaries better, right? I'm there, I'm working, and then when I leave, it's my time, my family time or whatnot. But that's something that I do. I definitely, the emails, unless, you know, it's something that's really urgent seeming or something like that, I do try to stick to a work day, and just Monday through Friday.
Nice. Yep. I'm in the office right now too. I can't do it. The spring when we were doing it all from home, I struggled so much with that. That was so rough. I'm not a big fan. What about you, Ethan?
I don't know if I do as well of a job. I think Mrs. Newton has a little more endurance than me. So I think she's almost always here by like 7:45, 8, and she doesn't leave until like 5. So she, I think, takes like almost like traditional office hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think I'm, especially now with just how much I'm staring at a screen, I need to take a break. So I like to split it up. And so I'll work from like 8 to 1 or 2, and then I'll spend some time with my kid. I also have a baby that goes down at like 7 o'clock. So if I want to spend any time with my baby, I need to get home when he's still awake, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I come back on about 7. I check my email, and I just see if there are any emails that like I absolutely need to respond to. Like there's a student saying, "Hey, I don't know how to do this. Like, could you check?" Or for instance, they're doing a test right now, and so sometimes someone will email me saying, "Hey, I think I got these questions right, but the test is saying they're wrong. Could you take a look?" And so stuff like that, I'll try to respond to quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And then, much like Mrs. Newton, I just don't respond to emails on the weekend. I'm still doing work on the weekend. I need a break from emails just because the amount of time it takes. And a lot of times it's like people turning in late assignments. And so as much as this seems like a silly complaint, the amount of time it takes to go in Power School and then get into a specific assignment to grade one person's assignment, it's like a 5-minute ordeal, which doesn't sound like that much. And then you realize that I get 10 to 15 of these late assignment emails every day. And unless I want to spend an hour to an hour and a half doing this, like I need to create some sort of boundaries there. So that's really what I try to do.
Yeah, well, very cool. Very cool. I like that, like both of them different boundaries, but they both work for you guys.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And Miss Newton, I always see your truck here. I swear it's like every morning I'm like, yeah, there it is. Yep.
Mrs. Moore, we don't see her anymore, but like Mrs. Moore, it's like she'd get here before me and she's be there after I was gone. I was like, okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. This was awesome. I appreciate hearing your perspective and getting some tips for parents. And hopefully this can kind of help parents and kids connect a little bit more and just get a glimpse into like what's going on behind the screen on your end. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Thanks so much.
And can I just say one final thing? I promise parents, if you send me an email saying that something's not working, like just personally for your child or looking for strategies, I will never be offended, even if it seems like it's critical of what I'm doing. Like, I don't think that I'm like infallible. And so questioning me is very okay. I tell the same thing to your students. So please feel free to send me an email anytime.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure a lot of kids and parents appreciate that too. Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. We'll see you guys later.
All right.
Yeah, see you in 9 minutes.